Boldwood presents The Girl in the Water, written by J.A. Baker, and read by Melanie Crawley. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. The river brought them to me. That's the only explanation I have for it. Drawn by the pull of its swirling eddies and rising mists, its allure too strong to ignore, they came my way and never left. The escape. Everywhere hurts as she dips her head and runs. It's like nothing she has ever experienced before. Even childbirth doesn't come close. As if needles are being repeatedly inserted into her joints, stabbing, jarring, eye-watering levels of pain. It doesn't stop her, though. She won't let it. The limits of her damaged body will not hold her back. She pounds the pavement with exhausted legs, feet burning, chest wheezing, as she weaves her way out of a dimly lit, tree-lined avenue. Legs pumping until her muscles feel fit to burst, she turns the corner, the anticipation of seeing her family once again searing over her skin like pinpricks of electricity. The thought of falling onto the warmth of her husband's oversized chest, of putting up with the constant battling of her teenage offspring, inhaling the familiar smell of her lovely old kitchen, they all loom large in her mind, forcing her on. A sob rattles through her chest. She takes a ragged breath and suppresses it, then stops, abruptly, frustration gripping her as she is faced with another long road, almost identical to the one she's just left behind. Where are all the people, for God's sake? What kind of ghost town is this? Where is the help she so desperately needs? Her gaze drops to the pavement and tears cascade down her face, hot and unstoppable as she attempts to work out where she actually is. She could hazard a guess, but her brain is like cotton wool, refusing to function as it usually would, deprived of nourishment and arrested by fear. Hysteria begins to claw its way up her gut and into her throat. What if she is being followed? She visualizes a dark, sinister figure lurking in the shadows, waiting for her to trip over or get lost or simply collapse from sheer exhaustion, her body folding in on itself from the shock and horror of it all. Her mind goes into overdrive. So many hiding places, a body slotted away down an alley just waiting to pounce, full of intent, and she starts to run again, picking up her pace at the thought of it. She has to keep on until she is sure she is safe, and until she sees somebody, she doesn't feel safe, not in these dimly lit streets. Darkness can swallow people, eat them alive. The filthy, soaking wet slippers on her feet slap at the puddles on the pavement, sending sprays of dirty water up over her legs. It doesn't matter. There was a time she would have stopped, cleaned herself up. Not now. Everything is different now. She slows down and winces, screws her eyes up against the wave of pain that works its way up her shins, continuing up through her rib cage and landing with a ferocious slam into her skull. She reaches up to touch the wound on her head, fingers trailing over a blood-encrusted gash the size of her fist. Folds of torn, wet skin shift softly under her touch. She retches and presses the heel of her hands into her mouth to stem the vomit that rises. She looks up again at the road that stretches off into the distance. Terraced houses on either side fence her in, their windows veiled in darkness. At the end of the street, she can see the corner of a huge Victorian-style sandstone building, ancient and imposing, like a mausoleum. An old hotel, perhaps, or a theatre, maybe a museum of some sort. It has that kind of look about it, antiquated, formidable. She stares at it, uses it as her focal point, telling herself if she can reach it, everything will be all right. In the distance, she hears the rumble of an engine, its low purr increasing as it edges closer. A beam of white light dips and rises as it turns the corner and slowly moves towards her. Summoning what little strength she has left, she jumps up and down, waving her hands above her head, shouting to the driver for help, screaming for him to stop. Her heart pounds in her chest. This is it. This is the part she has waited for so long. The part where she collapses into the safety of a warm, dry car with a kind-hearted person who expedites her home. The vehicle slows down, and a dark-skinned man with slicked back, silver hair leans over the passenger seat and stares at her with a perplexed expression, before shaking his head and moving on, the car lurching as he hits the accelerator with exaggerated force. A lump lodges in her throat, and more tears. She is bewildered at his lack of compassion. Pissed off and bloody furious, actually. What kind of person would ignore somebody in their hour of need? And right now, she is very much in need. She breathes hard and stares down at her hands, black and bloody, then at her trousers, filthy, creased and torn, and she can only imagine what her face must look like. This looks like a fairly nice area, a leafy suburb land. The kind of area where people aren't used to seeing scruffy-looking strangers staggering around the streets late at night pleading for lifts. What did he think she was going to do, though? Rob him? Beg for money? She runs faster, too scared and too angry to stop now. A row of doors pass her by in a blur. She briefly considers knocking, pleading with the residents to help her, but is frightened of what lies behind them. Experience has taught her that things are rarely what they seem. Even leafy suburbs have their dark secrets. Nobody can be trusted. Absolutely no one. Probably a good thing she didn't actually get in that car. She'll find her own way home. She needs to get to a place with lots of people, somewhere with crowds. Safety in numbers. The building remains tantalizingly distant as she slows down to catch her breath. She hasn't eaten for so long, she can't actually remember when it was. A couple of days? 3 or 4? Probably even longer. She has lost track of time and has no idea what day it is. Her legs buckle as she bends over and rests her hands on her thighs. She stands up and pushes on again, the searing, throbbing pain in her head becoming unbearable. She can't stop, though. Too risky. Just a few more minutes and she will be there. She hears the yell before she sees them. "Christ almighty! What's the hurry?" A group of women in their mid-20s step out from behind a high privet, staggering on stiletto heels, reeling backward as she ploughs into them, scattering them like ninepins. They stop and stare open-mouthed when they see her up close, see how filthy her face is, how her hands and arms are smeared and streaked with blood, and the size of the huge weeping gash on the side of her head as she crumples at their feet, sobbing hysterically. "Sorry. Oh, God. I'm sorry. I just need... Can you..." She reaches her arm up before snatching it away and curling up into a tight little ball, the cold of the concrete. "Fucking hell. Did your husband do this to you? I'd have his balls on a skewer if any fella tried to do that to me." Water seeps through her mud-spattered clothes as she unfurls and slumps awkwardly on the pavement, making no attempt to get back up. She is tired, so very, very tired. She murmurs, her voice hoarse, her lips cracked and sore as she tries to speak. The gang of women crouch down beside her, their long hair hanging over her face. It is soft and warm and smells of apples and honey. Even in the grey, dying light, their faces glow with carefully applied makeup, their lips shimmering with soft tones of peach and pink lip gloss. She weeps some more at the incongruity of it. "Sorry, love, you'll have to speak up. Hang on a minute." One of them stands up and punches a number into her phone. "You calling an ambulance?" one asks the other, who nods and cups her hand over the mouthpiece before turning away to speak. "OK. What were you saying?" "If you give us your husband's address, I know someone who can sort him out." She shakes her head and stares up at the sea of faces hovering over her. "Where am I?" There is a short burst of laughter, followed by a stony silence. "Christ, he must have given you a right good pasting if you don't even know where you are." A tall girl with kind eyes and a full painted mouth takes her hand and stares into her face solemnly. "You're in York, sweetheart. Just stay still now. An ambulance is on its way." She looks up at her friend, who nods to confirm. "York? Why am I in York?" she mutters, but nobody is listening as the whir of a siren pierces the distant night air and they all turn to look. Chapter 1. February 2014, 3 months earlier. Even in the midst of the chaos, I can hear it. With the removal men shifting wardrobes, sideboards and tables and chairs off the van, even above the shouting and grunting as they heave the bulky pieces of furniture around, staggering with them across the gravelled drive and into the house, even with me yelling at them to be careful with Martyn's mahogany desk, and even with the dog running around in circles and yelping at everyone and everything, I can hear it. It rushes by the back of the house, an unstoppable surge. A roaring, frothing wall of water that will continue to flow in spite of what day it is, what state the economy is in, or what war is occurring in the river makes its way over undulating ground, carving its way out to the sea while we fret over other things. Some important, some minutiae. It understands none of these man-made problems. The river rolls on regardless, forcing itself through the earth, constant and relentless. I don't expect anyone else to comprehend it, to understand my draw to this part of the world, the nagging desire to hear the rush of the current. Why would they? But this is where I need to be, near to where it happened, back to where it all began.
"Where do you want this one, then?"
An overweight, sweaty man is standing in the doorway, blocking out the light behind him. An unsightly sheen sits on his skin, and perspiration runs down his temples as he stares down at a large unmarked box, one of the few I haven't written on with my black marker pen. I did most of them, but this one somehow slipped my attention. His chest rumbles as he struggles to catch his breath. I look around at the empty hallway and the rooms leading off from it, and am mystified as to what to say to him. This place is completely alien to me. It's not my home. I left my home this morning. This is where I live now, and I don't even know where any of my things should go. "Over there," I say, a little too sharply, and point to an alcove in the dining area. It seems like as good a place as any. He draws a deep breath and lifts the box up, its weight causing him to stagger awkwardly as he makes his way past me into the large empty room, lunging forward as he puts it down at his feet. I want to shout after him to be careful, that it probably contains all my crockery and will need it to eat off pretty soon. But I can't seem to summon up the energy. It's been a long day, and I'm exhausted. It's highly likely that tonight's bed will be no more than a mattress on the floor with a crumpled bedsheet slung over it, but that's fine with me. I can handle that. I can't remember ever feeling so exhausted. Right now I could sleep where I stand. I watch from the large bare living room as the removal men drag the last of the furniture out of the van. A battered old rocking chair, the one I used to use to nurse Tom on the nights he refused to sleep. I say nurse. It was more of a ferocious jiggling movement accompanied by a stream of sleep-deprived tears. There's an ugly chest of drawers that I have kept for no other reason than it belonged to my mother, and finally, a small mahogany. Very telling, really. Such a small container for all that's gone before. I had intended to transport it myself to keep it safe, but in all the disorder and confusion it somehow ended up being put in the van, probably manhandled by a dozen or more clammy removal men. No matter. What's done is done. I march outside and grab it off the bulky male who is carrying it across the driveway. He mutters something under his breath as I turn away. I'm too tired to answer him. I don't trust my tongue to say polite, so I stay silent instead. I'll be glad to see the back of today. Martyn is standing, staring out of the kitchen window when I get back into the house. Beyond the river, in the distance, there is a view of the North Yorkshire hills, and he is staring at it intently, looking at the shadowy shape they etch into the grey sky beyond. He's been quiet all day, loitering in the background, keeping out of the way. I can't say I blame him. It's been an ordeal, and I doubt I've handled it well. Who does? Isn't moving house right up there with death of a loved one and divorce when measuring levels of stress? Put like that, I think I've acted like a bloody saint. I hope to God we've done the right thing moving here, Phoebe, he whispers hoarsely, a light rattle evident in his chest. Typical Martyn, full of doubts and worries. I move towards him and place my hand on his shoulder reassuringly. I'm certain. Look around you. This is a dream home. Give it 6 months and it'll feel as if we've lived here all our lives. I'll take your word for that. His voice is flat, monotone, his spine rigid as I try to manipulate some flexibility back into his posture. Trust me, I say, hoping to appease him. I want everything to be perfect, unscathed by what has happened. He shrugs his shoulders resignedly, then smiles as he turns and nods towards the hallway. Have they gone, the removal guys? He taps his walking cane on the floor and hobbles over to the table where he slumps down into a wooden chair, suddenly fatigued by it all. I stare at his face. He is looking old. The skin around his eyes baggy, his forehead lined, the shine on his irises dulled by years of constant pain. The past few years haven't been kind. Just unloading the last few boxes, I say, and listen to the sharp metallic. I'll head back out and speak with them. I kiss the back of his neck and walk outside, keen to catch them and take the remainder of our things before they come back in the house. I really don't think I can take any more of this moving palaver. I am bone-tired, and my tolerance levels have been eroded to the point of non-existence, and, rightly or wrongly, I don't think I can stand to have them back in here. I need to look around properly, see our new house for what it really is. Not the kind of cursory look when you first step foot in a house you were considering buying, but a proper look. A chance to decide what should go where, a chance to become immersed in its ambience and get used to the sheer size of it, without the hindrance of 6 dirty men hanging around, cracking silly jokes and generally getting in the way. Besides, Martyn needs some quiet time now. He's starting to get twitchy and fractious, and may even need a nap. It's long overdue. I stand at the gate and watch as they lock the rear of the lorry up, hitch up their pants, and clamber into the front seats. I see them watching me and feel my face burn. I've been mean. Not exactly mean, but definitely curt. No need for it, really. But right now, I'm running on empty and in desperate need of a break. I'm flooded with relief as the engine splutters into life and the large green truck rumbles its way through the village and disappears out of sight. This whole experience has been way more draining and stressful than I ever expected it to be. I sigh quietly. At least it's over with, and I can sit down with a cup of tea. That is, of course, if I can find the kettle. As I head back inside, I can hear Tilly yelping and running around frantically. Poor old girl, she'll be ready for her walk, her ageing bladder full to bursting. I look at my watch and widen my eyes at the rapid passing of time. Where has the day gone? She'll also need feeding. I usually set my watch by Tilly's toilet breaks and stomach demands. She is my dog now, and mine alone. Her physical needs are beyond Martyn's capabilities. I don't mind. On my bad days, Tilly is my reason for getting up out of bed and getting on with my day. As soon as I get sorted, I'll take her over the fields and into the other end of the village. We can do a bit of exploring and call into the corner shop to buy something for tea. Maybe Martyn will come along. Or maybe not. I suppress a deep, mournful sigh. Most likely it will be definite. I mentally go through what we need. I know that I've got some bits of food sorted for when we get up in the morning, boxes of cereal, tea bags, biscuits, nothing substantial but enough to get by. I'm not sure how Martyn feels, but I have no appetite at the moment. With all the toing and froing, food has been the furthest thing from my mind. Hopefully the walk will help me to work up a hunger. I perk up at the thought of going for a long stroll, of facing the chill of the late winter air, fighting off the bite of the bracing northeasterly wind that whips up from the river in sharp, stinging blasts. I'll get some cheese and bread to make sandwiches for supper. We can eat together and discuss the house, decide on where to put our furniture. I stare at the 40-foot living room stacked high with containers and blink back unexpected tears. I'm more exhausted than even I realised. I shut my eyes against them and steady myself. I will take a walk, reacquaint myself with the sights, and when I return, everything will look brighter.
I think I'll hang around here and sort out some boxes in the study, if it's all right with you.
I nod and smile at Martyn's comment, like he was ever going to come with me anyway. It's a game we play, pretending we have a normal life, pretending he is normal. It's what keeps us together. It's what keeps us sane. Martyn is picking his way through the mountain of containers stacked up in the living room as I clip Tilly onto her lead and put my shoes on. The boxes stand so high we can't even see out of the huge bay window. It's going to take us forever and a day to unpack, so I guess the sooner we start, the better. I rummage in my pocket to check I've got some doggy snacks and poo bags. I feel the familiar oily sensation of plastic between my fingers and delve further down to the bottom to check for snacks. There they are, dry and crumbly and probably months old, but it's better than nothing, and right now, chances of finding dog snacks amongst this lot is practically zero. No problem, I say. Is there anything you want bringing back? He shakes his head and looks around.
A team of servants to help us with this lot?
He's right. I laugh and roll my eyes. Even a team of servants would have the devil's own job unpacking this lot. What were we thinking when we bought it all? At the last count, we had 8 tea sets, 5 large cutlery sets, and 4 teapots, and for some bizarre reason, we also have 2 large coffee machines and 2 bread makers, neither of which actually... I exhale noisily and shake my head as Martyn shuffles further into the pile of cardboard boxes, the rustle of his movements the only indication he is still present as he disappears out of sight, swallowed by our wall of belongings. A mist is rising from the ground, grey and opaque, concealing the grass beneath my feet as it climbs its way up, wrapping itself around my ankles. I make my way over the field towards the far end of the village. Icy clouds swirl around me in ghostly wisps, like a vapour trail, almost enveloping Tilly completely. She jumps up and down, aware I have treats in my pocket. Her legs may not be as good as they once were, but her sense of smell is as acute now as it was when she was a pup. I reach in, snap one in half, and hold it in my fingers. She takes it from me, crunching on it greedily before we continue on, the fog slowly thickening to a real pea souper by the time we get there. You could call it quaint, I suppose. The local shop is a throwback to the 1960s. Barely touched by the passing decades, the exterior boasts a peeling facade and a window littered with faded posters and handwritten cards selling fridge freezers and washing machines, along with a section of desperate pleas to find missing pets. I stare down at the dusty windowsill, my eyes drawn to the array of dead flies, laid frozen, their spindly black legs pointing skyward. A bell above the door tinkles lightly as I go in, announcing my arrival in the gloom of the place. The noise echoes around the empty aisles, eerie and anachronistic, reminding me of my childhood. A memory jars me. This shop, a group of friends stuffing items in their pockets they hadn't paid for, then goading me, shouting at me because I point-blank refused to steal at their behest. Her face behind them, grinning, drinking in my misery. I force the memory down, squash it like an annoying insect, and look around, trying to take it all in. Such a stark contrast to the shops I usually frequent, and yet so familiar. Stirrings in the furthest recesses of my mind threaten to swamp me as I make my way up and down the narrow aisles. A shopping list scrunched up in my tiny hand, fear eating at me at the thought of what might lay in store for me when I get home. The arguments, the endless accusatory looks. The shelves are covered with patterned oilskin cloths that remind me of the tablecloths my grandma used to own. They have a sad-looking handful of working-class vegetables sprawled over them, cauliflowers, turnips, and a handful of mangy-looking carrots stare up at me. I imagine they still sell powdered custard and packets of Angel Delight as well, maybe even some Arctic roll ice cream. I suppress a smile and wander through the rest of the narrow, towering aisles. The whole shop has a certain smell to it. Not exactly musty, but neither is it fresh. It's exactly as I remember it, just smaller and older. I don't mind. I would rather shop here than push a trolley round some slick, overpriced supermarket that's full of plastic produce, especially a supermarket that employs staff who are forced to wear badges with smiley faces on them that proclaim how delighted they are to serve you. This is real life, how shops should be, full of real produce served by real people. I clear my throat and begin to fill up my basket. It's as if I've never been away. Looking for anything in particular? The voice seems to emerge from thin air. A middle-aged woman with short blonde hair and a blotchy complexion rises up from behind the counter. I find myself staring at her reddened skin, at the telltale patches of rosacea that have been left undiagnosed, untouched by the range of readily available creams and potions that could cure it with ease. She groans as she straightens her knees and dusts down her legs with gnarled hands that proclaim a hard life full of solid graft. Her nails, I notice, are bitten to the quick. We're a bit low on fruit and veg at the minute. Delivery man can't make it till the morning, but you can have what we've got at a lower price. And if it's eggs you're after, we only sell fresh. Straight from the farm over the back they are. We all do our bit round here to support each other. I smile as she places a tissue over her finger, runs it around the inside of her nostril, sniffs, and then pushes it back into her pocket. She steps out from behind the till and follows me down each aisle as I load my basket up with eggs, some bacon, a tub of butter, a slab of cheese, and half a dozen bread buns, her eyes never leaving me. I've read somewhere that you can analyse somebody's entire life just by looking at their groceries. Perhaps that's what she's trying to do with me. Work me out. Get inside my head. I wish her well with that one. Her proximity begins to unnerve me as I lean over to reach the back of the fridge, and she leans forward too, chatting all the while about how I'm her final customer. "Just something for a quick snack, eh?" she says as she steps back behind the counter and rings each item in the till before putting them in a bag. I nod and hand her the correct money. "Not seen you in here before. You staying at one of the holiday cabins down the road, are you?" I slip my purse back in my bag and shake my head. We've just moved in further down the village. Today, actually. Just getting something for our tea. I can feel the sudden curiosity in her demeanour. I'm the new kid in town, a person of interest. I imagine people moving into the village is about as exciting as it gets around here. "The Peterson place over by the edge of the woods," she says, trying to keep her voice low-key. She looks around surreptitiously, and I want to laugh at her attempts at being discreet. This is the quietest shop I've ever been in. Walls really must have ears. "Bit further afield," I reply, as I sling my bag over my shoulder and hoist one of the carrier bags off the counter. "All right. Not the Peterson place. So, which way you headed then?" For some reason, I am reticent to tell her everything. Being cautious is part of who I am now, an inclination I can't seem to shake. It's a form of self-preservation. Besides which, in a village this size, she is bound to find out anyway. "Back over that way," I say, nodding my head to indicate the route behind her. She narrows her eyes, trying to work it out. I'll bet she knows every house, every villager, everything that goes on around here. If I need to know anything about anything, she'll be the lady to come to. It takes her a while to work it out. When she does, her eyes light up with sudden recognition. "The big old barn conversion next to the green?" I tell her that's the one. She raises her eyebrows, gives me a look, and purses her lips. "Nice big place, that one is. Heard it's got right good views out back as well," she says haughtily. "It certainly has," I reply, placing the bag on the floor. My hands are tired and already it's slipping out of my grasp. We overlook the river. "And footpath too," she sniffs, as if to emphasise her point. I nod, already used to this reaction. Many thought me mad when I first said I was considering moving into a house that had a public right-of-way cut straight across its garden. The solicitor advised me to take out insurance to cover against any injuries incurred by people passing through. I politely declined. Even Martyn had his reservations about it, but I stood my ground. Properties in this area that overlook the river don't... The obvious thing. It was now or never. Truth be told, the house isn't that important to me, and nothing like the property we moved from. Our big old semi is a far cry from this place. It's a bold move for us, and I do realise how fortunate I am to be able to live in such a grand old place, and it is grand. The kind of property estate agents brag about having on their books. The kind of house most people only ever dream about living in. But that's not why I bought it. You see, it's the river I really want to be near. The river is what brought me back. Having to put up with a damn silly footpath is worth it just to be back where I really belong. That's why it took so long to sell, you know, 'cause of the path. Nobody wants a load of strangers traipsing through the garden, do they? Her face suddenly colours up, aware of her blunder. I shrug my shoulders and smile. She seems nice enough, this lady. I'm not about to defend my position, get all bristly and territorial and make her feel uncomfortable. I'm new around here and need all the friends I can get. Guess I'm not like other folk then. It really doesn't bother me. In fact, once the weather picks up, I'm looking forward to seeing them all. The lies trip off my tongue with ease. Years of practice. Her relief is palpable. She continues, her voice lighter, contrived. Supposed to be a cracker of a summer this year as well, so it'll get used plenty. I hope so, I say, and pick the bag back up, trying to keep an air of friendliness in my voice. Exhaustion is threatening to engulf me, and I've yet to make it back home, dog, bags and all. You in that big old place on your own then? Or you got family living with you? I stop, and my breath catches in my chest. This is the bit I hate. The explanations, having to tell people about Martyn's injury and subsequent lapse into depression, about how he relies on me for everything, about how I pray day in and day out that he'll miraculously get better and not need me to be his main and only carer. I feel a small veil of darkness descend at the reality of it all. Some days it's like a long and endless route. Then other days, well, there are other days when I feel glad to be alive. Still, at least he didn't find the move too traumatic. In actual fact, he has probably handled the whole thing better than me. I've been a bag of nerves, preempting everything, creating problems that aren't actually there, whereas Martyn sailed through the whole procedure with aplomb. Not complaining about the drive here, not minding at all when we had to wait. I wouldn't want him to risk further injury by carrying anything. When I think about it, he's been marvellous throughout. Not once did his temper get the better of him. Not once. A small tick takes hold in the corner of my eye. I flick at my lashes to bat it away and wiggle my jaw to relieve myself of a headache I feel coming on. I pretend I haven't heard her question and begin to walk towards the door. It's easier that way. I haven't the energy or the inclination to go through it all. "I'll see you around then," she says to my back, her small bright eyes boring into me. I turn and give her a generous smile. "Absolutely," I reply, before heading outside to collect Tilly, who is sitting waiting patiently for me. Such a good girl she is. "Come on, my lovely, let's head home," I say quietly. I lean down and unhook her lead from the railing that is now damp from the mist. We'll get sorted in that new kitchen of ours and make some supper. I look up to see a crop of blonde hair and a ruddy face watching me through the door, the expression serious and her gaze immovable as she scrutinises my every move. All the while, a voice in my head screams, "She knows!" Chapter 2. I got lost on the way back. Silly, really, when you consider how well I used to know the place. It was the fog, you see. Somehow I took a wrong turn and ended up on what appeared to be the other side of the river, except it wasn't the other side at all. In my confusion and rising sense of panic, I had followed it round an oxbow and could see the house from where I was standing. A large Tudor-style barn in the distance, hovering high above the mist in a world of its own, untouched by the elements. The whole detour unnerved me slightly, but somehow I managed to find my way back and now stumble in the front door exhausted, damp and dishevelled. I drop the bags at my feet and heave a sigh of relief as I wipe the back of my hand across my face and push my sodden hair back out of my eyes. Droplets of water drip from my eyelashes and chin onto the tiled floor in tiny splashes, like baby tears. I try to kick off my shoes, but they're so filthy and damp I end up slumping down on the floor to remove them, and am in a complete sweat by the time I've managed to practically tear them off my feet. They sit next to me, a heap of mangled fabric and mud. Martyn is standing in front of me, and he is livid. He had been overpowered and dragged away by the current. What then, eh? I smile at him and haul myself upright. I drag the bags into the kitchen and begin to unpack the shopping, doing my best to make light of the whole situation. I try to dismiss his concerns and tell him it was a silly mistake on my part, but the air is thick with his anger. My hands tremble as I fill the kettle and get out a couple of tea bags. Mugs. I need to find some mugs. Hunger gnaws at my stomach, now empty after such a long walk, and I feel a growing sense of unease at Martyn's deteriorating mood. I do my best to draw him out of it, but he remains resolute in his stance. Sometimes I think he even enjoys it.
"Don't ever do this again, Phoebe. Are you listening to me? You having an accident is the last thing we need right now. Jesus, as if our life isn't difficult enough."
I turn to face him and nod, hoping he can see my concerned expression, the way my cheeks colour up when I'm anxious, how a spasm takes hold in the corner of my eye when he speaks to me like that. Today had all been going so well, and then I go and ruin it with my stupid sense of direction. He continues to stare at me, his eyes unblinking as he follows my movements around the kitchen. I dart about, trying to radiate a sense of lightness, give the impression I am unperturbed by his mood. That's the only way to deal with it, to show him that I am busy and that I refuse to get dragged into a completely avoidable row. I hum quietly as I open a box and get lucky. 2 cups are sitting at the top of it. I fish them out and continue through the process of making tea, taking as long as possible, waiting for the moment to pass. My tactics work. By the time I've finished, he has calmed down and I feel myself relax. I even manage a nervous smile as I stir in his milk and look his way. I understand his plight, of course I do. He feels emasculated by his disability and his reliance on me for everything. I'm almost certain I would be just as angry if I was him, so I completely get it. That's why I let things go. Acceptance is easier than resentment and anger. So is forgiveness. And I have that by the shed-load. That's just how it is. My pulse begins to settle as I place Martyn's cup in front of him. Steam billows out of it. Earl Grey, a particular favourite of his. He sits at the island in the centre of the kitchen, his shoulder dipped as he carefully sips at the steaming liquid. Pale and tinged with a grey. I have no idea how he does it. It's like drinking perfume. I drag a chair over and join him, and we sit in companionable silence, drinking and staring out at the hills in the distance. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when he was able-bodied, less prone to flare-ups, able to face the world with a smile and not perceive everything as a threat or see it as a sign of imminent danger. Perhaps we'll have those days again, although I very much doubt it. It's just a silly pipe dream I have. I know deep down it won't ever happen, but I keep it, store it in my head, use it as a little teaser, something to keep me going through the dark times, and God knows we have plenty of those.
"Some ramblers came by while you were out," he says,
his eyes refusing to meet mine. He keeps his gaze fixed on the misty, darkening countryside beyond. He is always ashamed of his outbursts. He's not by nature a violent or cruel man. They're fuelled by his lack of mobility and lack of contact with the outside world. I nod at his words and quietly sip my tea, unsure what it is he wants to hear, so I play it safe and say nothing. I don't want to lose it, this piece of tranquillity. Times like these are rare, fleeting, so I snatch at it greedily and savour the moment.
"I suppose we'll see quite a few of those now, won't we?"
he continues, the colour starting to seep back into his cheeks. "I suppose we will," I reply quietly, hoping it was all just a blip and is now behind us. Perhaps seeing the odd walker will help him now we've moved here, provide him with a crumb of comfort in his tiny insular world. I watch him for a while, see how his eyes crease up at the corners as he speaks, and admire how tenacious he is in the face of such adversity, how he battles on against all odds without question. I clear my throat and stand up. I need to go and make the bed up.
I grimace at the thought. I have no idea where the sheets and duvets are, so the sooner I start the whole arduous process, the better. It might take me minutes, it might take me hours. Depends if I get lucky with opening the right container. I'm almost certain I labelled them, but I'm almost at the point where I can no longer think straight. Do you need any help? My eyes well up at this suggestion. Oh, if only he could. If only. I shake my head and tell him I will be fine. He gives me a weak help. My small box is exactly where I left it. I pick it up and head upstairs to the main bedroom. Every bone in my body aches as I carry it carefully and place it on the floor at my feet. I flinch at the thought of all those grisly removal men manhandling it and give it a quick rub to remove all traces of them. I consider opening it, just having a quick rummage. I do that sometimes, lay everything out, check it's all intact, read it carefully, remind myself of everything I've been through, tell myself I'm a survivor. But not tonight. It's late. I'm tired and we need a bed. I stride across the room and plonk myself in the middle of it all, the detritus that is currently our life. Luckily, most of the larger boxes are marked, and it only takes me 2 attempts to locate the quilts and pillows. I fling them over the mattress that is laid haphazardly on the floor. The frame is yet to be assembled. All in good time. I briefly wonder if I should make up the spare bed for Martyn, or if he'll sleep with me. It all depends on whether or not his back and leg are giving him more grief than usual. Sometimes we go to sleep together, and when I wake up the following morning, he's taken himself off. Too much pain. Too many demons. More often than not, by the time I get up, he is downstairs wandering. I have no idea what time he gets up. I've learnt not to ask. It's like tearing at an exposed vein, asking him about his thoughts, trying to get him to let me inside his head. Sometimes certain things are best left unsaid. It hasn't always been like this. We were happy once. We had a life, a real life. Not like now, where I do what I can to get us by and Martyn wanders around all hangdog and soaked in simmering anger and self-pity. We used to do things together, go shopping, go on holiday, have friends round. Now we simply exist. But I'm hoping that by moving here to this house, this oversized and overpriced house, will change all that. Here, I can give life another go, be comfortable with my surroundings, and be able to cope with what goes on in my own head. Martyn seems to forget he's not the only one with a past. We all have our own demons to cope with. Excitement surges through my veins at the thought of it. Being back in my own part of the country, near the water and with the rolling hills of North Yorkshire so close you feel you can reach out and almost touch them. Village life is who I... This is where I really belong, and if I am being honest, always have. Just the thought of being so close to the river as it rushes past my house each and every day. I close my eyes and let out a shuddering breath. It will soon feel as if I've never been away. I decide to leave the other bed for tonight. Making up one is enough, and I simply don't have the energy to attempt another one. Martyn can either come and sleep with me or find somewhere else to lay his head. Not that there is anywhere else that will be more comfortable. The old wooden kitchen chairs we have out for convenience are hardly conducive to sleeping, and the breakfast stools around the island aren't even comfortable for sitting. I grab a handful of towels and my bag of toiletries and head into the bathroom. Martyn's medication plops out into the sink as I empty the bag to look for the soap. It topples over and lands face up, rattling around the sink, an echoing reminder of our daily struggle. My heart begins to pump rapidly as I try to recall whether or not he has taken today's dose. In all the mayhem, he may well have missed it. That would explain his agitation earlier. I pick it up, open the packet, push his tablet out of the blister pack, and trudge downstairs. He is sitting, staring out of the kitchen window, his shoulders hunched, his eyes glazed over, our exchange of pleasantries a few minutes earlier now just a dim and distant memory. A sliver of ice darts down my spine. I know that look. I know it all too well. I start to sing softly as I fill the kettle, hoping it will make this whole thing marginally less difficult. I have a lot of strategies I employ regularly to deal with my husband, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't. You want another cup of tea, love? His silence is loaded with a slow, festering anger, the air heavy with his fury. I'm able to sense it now, but not always able to stop it, if only. As surreptitiously as I can, I open the small capsule and empty its powdery contents into the cup. It's easier to do it this way. He's too far gone now to reason with, and if I try to force it on him, there's no telling what he'll do. He still hasn't responded to my question, but then I didn't really expect him to. I was only trying to fill an awkward silence, to halt his declining temper before it erupts into something unmanageable, something quite ugly. I stir the hot water into his cup and dip a tea bag in it before adding the milk. As unobtrusively as I can, more silence ensues. An interminable, protracted air of nothingness where I can hear my own blood as it courses through my system, hot and thick with fear and trepidation. He takes a sip, and then another, his expression unreadable. I try to relax, to subliminally urge him to do the same. Then he turns to face me, and the look in his eyes makes my throat close up. "What?" he whispers at me, his nostrils flaring as he fixes his eyes on the cup. "What's this for? More bloody tea, Phoebe. I didn't say I wanted any more, did I?" And before I have a chance to stop him, Martyn picks up the cup and hurls it against the wall, the shattering of porcelain an explosion in the heavy silence of the room. A stream of amber liquid runs down the white walls and covers the floor, pooling in the spaces between the tiles, turning the cream grouting a murky shade of orange. Had I not seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have thought it possible for a small vessel of liquid to disperse with such force and cover such a wide area. A couple of drips of scalding hot tea hit my cheek and ferociously burn at my skin. I dab the side of my face with a tissue as carefully and furtively as I can, but obviously not sneakily enough, as Martyn sees me and is on his feet, his hands balled into fists at his sides. I watch him through narrowed eyes as he rocks from side to side, his tall, lean body quivering with unspent anger. "For God's sake, leave your bloody face alone. There's nothing wrong with you. Not everything is always about you, you know." He is standing close by, roaring over the top of my head. With shaking hands, I drop the tissue and am up, out of the chair to get away from him, begging him, shouting at him to leave me alone, to calm down. In my haste to escape, I step on a fragment of the shattered cup and hop about in pain. I inadvertently let out a yelp and clamp a hand over my mouth. Any reactions from me will only aggravate him all the more. I've learnt that particular lesson the hard way. A muffled sob escapes as tears sting at my eyes. It's not just the pain, though. Dealing with Martyn isn't easy at the best of times, and today I am utterly exhausted. I know, however, from past experience, he mustn't see the tears. Martyn hates weak people. And usually I'm not. I'm really not. But it's been a trying time and such a long day. I sniff and swallow hard. I have to keep it together. Without me, Martyn is incapable of functioning. Without me, he is nothing. As quickly as I can, I limp out of the kitchen and upstairs into the bathroom, where I examine my bleeding foot and carefully pick out a small but sharp ceramic splinter, dabbing at the sore spot with a wad of toilet paper. I half expect him to follow me and listen out for the creak of the stairs as he makes his way up. I can hear him below, pacing the floor up and down, up and down. I visualise his furrowed brow and raging expression. My skin prickles as I brace myself for the sound of his footsteps coming to get me, hobbling up the stairs, his unabated rage fueling him. But then suddenly, all the noise downstairs stops. I sit perfectly still and pray that he has finally calmed down. The sound of my breathing rattles around the room. I let out a tentative sigh and run trembling fingers through my hair. I find myself becoming grateful for the smallest of mercies these days. With any luck, his temper has now dissipated and normality has returned. That's the thing with his rages. They are explosive, unpredictable, but over within minutes. I say a quiet prayer of thanks to whoever may be listening for my reprieve, and stand up, slowly putting weight on my injured foot. I won't try to give Martyn his medication now. It can wait till the morning. He's always better first thing, more approachable, less volatile. I stand for a little while until the tears stop flowing and my heart stops jumping around my throat, then stagger into the bedroom, over to the mattress and drop onto it with a thump, my eyes so heavy I can barely keep them open. I drag the duvet up over my head and feel a heavy blanket of welcome sleep begin to descend. Chapter 3. I said it would sell sometime this year, didn't I? You've said it for the last 3 years, Mike. It had to happen eventually. Anna moves away from the window and makes an attempt at tidying up, a pointless activity when Mike and the kids are all in the house. She gathers up a pile of magazines and slots them into the paper rack, picks up the rug to give it a shake, then moves back to the window, her curiosity too piqued to look away. What kind of people have the money to buy a house that size anyway? Looks like they've got plenty of stuff to fill that big old place. Her stomach tightens as she watches furniture get carried. She has counted at least 4 Chesterfield sofas being dragged off the van, and an oak sideboard so big it would fill her entire kitchen. She always said it would take a lottery winner to be able to afford that house, and judging by the gear being hauled off the removal truck, it looks like that's what they have got living opposite them. Some people seem to have it all. A clatter from upstairs disturbs her viewing. Anna grits her teeth and races up there, hollering all kinds of threats to Mason and Callum, who stare at her with boyish innocence. The bedroom is littered with games and leads trailing from Xboxes and PlayStations, the floor covered with magazines and balled-up socks where they have pelted each other from their beds. With only a year age difference between them, it's more like having twins. Neither of them takes the lead when it comes to keeping the place clean. Being the elder of the two at 13, Anna wishes Callum would exert a more positive influence over his younger brother, be the sensible one, but most days they both seem to be as bad as each other. Anna rolls her eyes and stares at the mess. She should tidy it, but simply can't face the thought of it. It's so cluttered with clothes and gadgets and books and general detritus, she wouldn't know where to start. Her heart isn't in it. Maybe tomorrow, or next weekend. She gives the boys one last warning look from under her lashes, then closes the door and leaves them to it. She is more intrigued by the goings-on over the road and finding out who their new neighbour is than sorting out her errant children. She does that on a daily basis, and now it's worse since they're off for half-term. The last 2 days have been hell. Their behaviour, although sometimes mildly entertaining, is really beginning to grind on her. It's all solid mahogany and oak furniture by the looks of it. I'm pretty certain I saw a solid walnut bookcase get carried in. No plastic or cheap veneer stuff over there. Must have some money to have bought all that lot.
Mike rustles his paper and stares at her over the top of his glasses, his eyes narrow with exasperation. Well, obviously. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford a house that size, would they? His laugh is a loud bark, laced with sarcasm and, thinks Anna, perhaps just a touch of jealousy. Mike works hard, but even if they saved for 100 years, the old barn conversion would never have been within their reaches. The previous owners spent most of their time abroad, and Anna never really got to know them. She sighs. A house that size